Buongiorno. Good afternoon, persons of quality. Welcome to the Aquinas Lecture Series. Our presenter today is an Aquinas graduate, Chris LaPorte. He earned his Master of Fine Arts degree from the New York Academy of Art. He is currently a member of the Aquinas Art Department, and he is an Art Prize winner. Today he is going to speak on the topic New Work in Progress. So please join me in welcoming Chris LaPorte.
Thanks, Brent. We set? Okay. Thanks all for coming. The title, Work in Progress or New Work, will be just a little bit at the end. What I'm going to do is present you with some work that leads up to my current body of work, starting way back from when I was a student here at Aquinas College. And this first image is from, I believe, my second painting class with Jim Carcina. And part of the significance of this is that I had the option of becoming a fourth generation in a family retail shoe business. And one of the series I did while I was a student was paintings of shoes. And my family comes into this quite a bit, so that's why we have a picture, a painting of shoes. So fast forward quite a bit, post-graduate school, I embarked on another body of work where I made origami animals and then would set them up into still lifes. I liked the idea of having something flat but three-dimensional. Also that origami is an ancient art form, and this is a traditional way of presenting painting or using paint. And of course it's a contemporary work of art. So trying to get a lot of history wrapped into these things that end up being fun and playful. So this one's called Bronx Zoo. At the time, the Bronx Zoo had a panda on loan from China. I think the stipulation of the loan was that if the panda had any offspring, then the Bronx Zoo could keep it. So the Bronx Zoo was working very hard to get pandas to procreate. And then I also became fascinated with using many individuals in the context of, a group that I apologize for the quality of the slide. It's not very good, but each of these camels ended up projecting a different personality because of just the tiny little folds that would just happen to take place during the process of creation. So each of them looked a little bit different, but of course they're all camels. They're all shaped similarly, slightly different sizes. That's when I just really started thinking about how individuals can work together or create something bigger than the sum of their parts. This one's called, what is this called? Camels, no. Caravan. This is called Caravan. And this was done around 2000. I was also doing a lot of dinosaurs. Similar thing. Remember seeing in National Geographic on the cover, they had a whole herd of elephants along the shore of a river or lake, so there was a reflection, and I liked how the abstraction of that would mirror the image of the actual animals walking across the shoreline. So I set up this still life using a mirror. This one's called Migration. This is, again, in 2000. And this one was impossible, nearly impossible to create with origami. It was a whole book that went into creating this out of, I think, 30 different sheets of origami paper. But again, the idea of creating something that alludes to history, but is also present. And what is this called? Excavation. And this too is in 2000, 2001. And at the same time, I was still working on formal portraits. This one is of my grandmother, a few years before she passed away. She sat for me, so much of this was done from life, but I also worked from photographs in order to complete the drawing. But her story comes into the whole process shortly. She's pretty significant. And around that time, 2003, I started teaching here at Aquinas, but also at Kendall, Grand Valley, making the adjunct rounds. And often during longer poses, I would paint partly for demonstration, but also as an opportunity to, practice what I was preaching, so to speak. So the next few are some paintings I did here at Aquinas while everyone else in the class was painting as well. So these are very formal life painting setups. I think this is 8 by 10, small study. And this too is from a drawing class for life drawing. I think it was here at Aquinas. This is probably 2005. And then I was also doing some, keeping up with the portrait work, I was doing some formal commissions. This next one is an oil painting of a client's nephew. And the next few are other commissions. These are about 16 by 20 inches. I think it was Ron Peterson, who's in the room right now, asked me to teach a watercolor class, which I do not enjoy watercolor, but in order to get ready for the class, I decided to really get into watercolor so I understood better what I was teaching. And this is one of the products of that. This is actually my sister and her best friend, probably would have been 5 years old, but working from photographs and trying to get more out of the image than is actually there. And then leading up to more recent work, these are some formal portraits of cousins. I got in the habit of doing portraits like this for gifts. I think these were Christmas gifts for my aunt. And I would make prints of these and they would be given to the rest of the family. Because I think my mom once said, we'd really prefer artwork from you than something you can buy at a store. So, and then one of those is my dad was not very happy with this portrait, but this is of my father. And he's very significant in that, prior to, I'll get back to him in a second, but it was at my grandmother's funeral that at the reception there was a big table filled with photographs that everyone in the family had collected from, 100 years on. And at the time, I grabbed several that I didn't exactly know why at the time, but they seemed very significant. Like they needed to be something more than just a 3 by 5 image. But I grabbed those and wasn't really sure what I was going to do with them, but it was kind of in the back of my mind and somewhat in the back of my pocket for a while, until in 2009, in September, my dad was accidentally killed in an automobile accident. He was riding his bike, and that hit me really hard. I wasn't sure what to do with that, and a lot of ways of coping is to bury yourself into something, and it occurred to me that I had all this imagery, and I was just going to bury myself into that work, in a way kind of working through the grieving process. And that leads up to the next image, which is actually of my grandmother right here and her siblings. And this is called Navarre's of Woodside. And this was one of those 3x5 photographs that was on the table at my grandmother's funeral reception. And I didn't realize it at the time, but in a way, I mean, my grandmother, most of her siblings, they're all passed away, but the attraction and I guess the goal was to, in some way, bring them back to life, make them present. So the decision to make them life-size, so that they're in the room with us, versus something that's long ago or far away, was very important. And a lot of the other aspects that I mentioned before, like individuality in the context of a group. And then that was the precursor to an image that may be familiar. This is the study I did in preparation for the life-size drawing of cavalry. It's currently over at the library. And here it is at the Grand Rapids Art Museum during Art Prize. And here's another image of that over at the Art Prize Hub in 2011. Then post that, I did much smaller things. I think the 9-month process of just, again, burying myself in this one monumental piece was pretty exhausting. So stepped it back a bit, and this is a detail of a drawing I did for the UICA's live coverage fundraising event. This is in their live auction. This is a detail that the boy would be life-size, so it would probably be maybe 60 inches tall and 48 inches wide. This is called Heir to the Estate. Somewhat reluctant to accept his role. And then after that, I was asked to draw an image for celebration on the Grand. This is an image that I found in the first, the archive of the first celebration on the Grand, I believe in 1980. And this was a crowd waiting for former President Ford and former First Lady to drive by for the dedication of the Gerald Ford Museum. And so this seemed significant in that not long before this, a few months before this, people did the same thing to watch Gerald Ford drive through to be buried. I believe this is 60 inches wide and 48 inches tall. This is called Curbside. And then in 2011, participated in Art Prize again, and with a relatively smaller drawing. This is called Funeral. This, too, is taken from a family archive. This is of my grandmother, who is right here. This is her. That was probably her first funeral, first experience with the idea of death. And part of the significance of wanting to draw this image was that I happened to be with her in the room when she died, when she passed away. I was setting up for my BFA show here at Aquinas when my father got a hold of me to let me know what was happening. She happened to be in Grand Rapids and had a stroke and was over at Blodgett, and I rushed over there, and as soon as I was there, the whole family was there, she passed away. So thinking about her and the scope of her life, I wonder what she may have thought of her own mortality at this point. And, you know, the composition, there's like a circular element to this, and I felt there was a circular experience with me, having seen this and seen her really at the end. So after this, I did a few more smaller pieces. This is called Tweedy. I like this tweed coat, but also there's this idea of life happening to you, and I think I tell my students a lot often, let the drawing or sculpture or painting tell you what it needs. And using these images that I think this was either from a tintype or a small 2 by 3 inch, I can only carry these things so far from the resource, and then have to let the drawing kind of dictate what needs to happen to it to get that detail, expression, the feeling, all of that into it. So these smaller pieces feel a bit like exercises leading up to, again, another monumental piece. This is a study for City Band. This is the latest monumental piece that was in Art Prize 2012 and is currently on display at the University of North Carolina for a drawing exhibition there. And this is a drawing in process to give you an idea of the scale. And then this is at the Grand Rapids Art Museum right before Art Prize. And then I also included, this is a detail to give you an idea of the mark making involved. I deliberately used 2H pencils for the whole drawing. 2H would be the equivalent of a number 4 academic pencil, which is very dense. It's difficult to smudge, and part of the idea behind that is to show the artist's hand, show that it's not necessarily just about the imagery, but it's also about the process, that the collective of all these strokes relate to the imagery itself. Like if you looked at each of these pencil marks relating to each of the individuals in the band, if you took each individual and put them together in a certain way, they equal something greater than the sum of the parts. So too is the physical nature of the thing itself, that the organization of these lines in a certain way will yield something grander. So at this time, I'd like to share with you a video. If I can. This is a video that a friend made in preparation for Art Prize 2012 about City Band. There's a prologue that describes what Art Prize is. It's intended to give the context of the whole event and how this drawing may fit into that. Art Prize is a art competition.
Art Prize is a new thing, a new idea. You see, Art Prize is just simply a big prize.
Anyone in the world can participate. The prizes are decided on by the public.
You make Art Prize. It's time to get your hands dirty.
In 2010, I submitted the drawing Cavalry. It is a pencil drawing, a portrait of 63 World War I vets shortly after the war. It is an exploration of individuality in the context of uniformity. The individuals appear to be life-size. Because I don't want this to be an echo of something long ago. I want it to be in the room, present, alive. There's a really interesting moment when I was standing in front of the drawing, just looking down the way and having all these people look at those people, looking at these people. The actual art, to me, may not really be what was on that piece of paper, but the space and energy that was happening in between. It was a life-changing experience. Conceiving, executing, and resolving this monumental work on paper that never would have really thought was possible. It ended up receiving first place for the competition, and it drew a lot of attention to what I've done and anticipation about what I might do next. The inspiration is a photograph that I found in my mother's basement. It's of my grandfather and his high school marching band. It's an 80-year-old thing that is damaged. A lot of the information is blurry. It's not there. Very much like the limitations of my own personal memory of him. When you're looking over items that could potentially be part of artwork, you look for things that hum. Certainly when I found that, it was humming and glowing, like there's something about this that resonates. Most everyone has gone through a high school experience, that awkward, how much of that experience definitely filters into who you are now. But while you're in it, it's all just happening. The way I make these drawings, I'm making many individual lines, relying on a grid system to move the imagery up to a big scale is pretty daunting. But if you increment it out into a series of panels, each one's a little victory. There is a lot of erasing and redrawing. It's not only necessary, it's also kind of the point. The greatest opportunity to learn is when you don't do it right. As my fine art experience has developed, so too has my experience with drawing caricatures. That's been the main mode of financial support through my adult life. I've probably drawn somewhere around 100,000 people. If a kid sits down and they may have a brow that is brooding, I open their face up because that's the impression I get from them. As that relates to my fine artwork, particularly this drawing, it's a more drawn out, more nuanced exploration of that. For instance, I'm thinking about a certain face, and not just open, but open and sad and troubled and unsure. How do I fit all those things into subtle postures? We take so many cues about the environment around us from how other people are reacting to what's going on with their face. It's very small, but what it communicates is enormous. There are certain faces that I do look forward to. I really was looking forward to the little drummer. He's like seemingly half the age of everyone else in there. He's trying so hard to be important and bigger than himself. I just couldn't wait to get to him. I also was looking forward to doing the drum major so much that I skipped over panels. He was trying to be so proud and important, but man, he just looks geeky and awkward. I like that clash. It's like the superhero who's not very impressive. So much about this has to do with the line, a timeline, a drum beat or a heartbeat, the song or the band, and the marching through life. The fates, one of the fates fashioned the thread that is your life, and then there's the middle fate that weaves out of that thread the story of your life, and then the last fate cuts the thread, and it's your death. So much has to be about what it implies versus what it illustrates, which I think is what most of our experiences are with life. We have to kind of fill in a lot of blanks in order to make sense of things because so much is unknowable. From the time of finding the photograph to completing the drawing, the last pencil stroke, putting it up on the wall for exhibition is right around a year. Cavalry was, in a way, felt like a stab in the dark. This feels more like I'm taking aim. I have more experience working out the technical issues of creating such a thing that I can concentrate on things that I couldn't before. Recognizing there's a carpet in the front, that there are folds in, then I can make bumps or ridges that are just like an echogram that records your heartbeat. I don't know why initially I put my grandfather's birthday on the clock, that would represent his birth, and towards the end, his death. In terms of the artwork, I want it to have a greater impact. When you follow your dream or follow what's in your heart, the universe will tend to conspire. An opportunity will come your way. If you follow through with that, you'll become identified with that thing. It'll be the direction of the stream that you're in. PowerPoint. So I have two more images to share with you. So the drawing that I'm currently embarking on is a family portrait of my grandfather, who's right here, and his family, my great-aunt, great-uncle, my great-grandparents. Taking what I've learned from City Band, I'm going to make this more of a stage. So there'll be a curtain, similar to what you see here on the sides. And I'm going to play with a lot of patterning on the wall, on the floor, like this carpet. And also perhaps have some kind of spectrally image in the background representing some kind of foreboding. And then the next monumental piece that I would like to embark on is called Schoolhouse. And this will be approximately 8 to 10 feet tall and 45 to 50 feet wide. And it'll encompass this entire grade school. I think there's 247 subjects. Pretty daunting. But again, I'd like to use, things that rearranging of some figures, adding elements that allude to the idea of drama, props. Again, maybe more ghosts and things that allude to multiple storylines, like in classical drama or Shakespeare. Things that would allude to this being not just a picture of them, but something that alludes to the story of their life and the timeline or the thread that each of them now would be spent. So that's it for now as far as presentation. I'd like to open it up to any questions at this point.
Dana, I saw you. Okay, I was out at the Wyeth Museum out in Delaware or Pennsylvania, wherever. They're right at the border there. And as you were showing some of your paintings, I was wondering if you've had some influence from Andrew Wyeth. The use of the background and the way the figure stood
Sure.
out was really reminiscent of that.
Yeah, absolutely. There was recently a Wyeth exhibition at the Kalamazoo Institute of Art. And he primarily, he worked in watercolor, but he also worked in tempera paint, which is more impasto than you would think. Impasto is the thickness of paint, so you can actually see the ridges. And I remember that really striking me, reinforcing that idea of mark making and having something that can be appreciated not just for what the imagery is, but also the abstract nature of the thing. I mean, colored mud arranged on, weaved cotton fiber, to think about it that way. Or, graphite that's embossed on flattened wood pulp. I mean, to think of it as an object, as a drawing or a painting. And he's somebody who works very representationally, but when you see the work in person, you can sense how it is an artifact or evidence of a thing, an evidence of a process.
Now that we have digital photography and I think the actual object of the photograph is not going to exist in the way that it has in the past.
Sure.
I mean, how do you feel like that about that? Do you feel like the ability to go back and find these things, like your family threw them on the table,
Yeah.
will be gone, and do you think that'll affect how you continue working?
I don't know. So far I've collected such an abundance of imagery. I mean, I could work a couple lifetimes and not get to it all. There's so many things that I'd like to do, and just trying to figure out what will be next, or what is it that's going to be interesting enough to sustain me through the process of the whole thing. Because I mean, obviously this is pretty daunting. So I don't know. I mean, part of why I select what I select is that these people are gone, so there aren't really too many digital photographs of people, at the more towards the beginning of their lives that, now that would be communicated that, yeah, obviously this is long ago. Yeah, that's true. I guess I really haven't thought about that too much. I mean, like I said, so much of the imagery that I like to do keeps piling up before I get a chance to actually create the artwork. I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah, thank you.
Chris, I was wondering if you could talk about the difference between working in black and white with pencils versus painting, kind of what they do for you, or what, I mean, you seem to prefer the drawing with black and white, but is it because it does something that's sort of soul satisfying more than painting for you?
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of answered part of the question. Yes. I think with painting, there's, relative to using a pencil and relying on these lines, there's an immediacy. You can block in a whole value and hue and temperature and do that right away. Where in order to build this up, it takes time and kind of a meditation. compartmentalizing things out over a long period of time. And I feel like that relates to the concept more. I mean, if it was painted, yeah, of course the process would be revealed, like talking about Andrew Wyeth. And I think when one looks at a pencil drawing with all this mark making, there's the impact is wow. You know, that's an investment of one's self into that, which, you know, part of it is, you know, really an investment of really thinking about this stuff and having the time to really, I mean, the word draw, but to drawn out. And that's really important, I think, not just to me and what I want to do, but also the impact that the work has. Any more questions?
When you're drawing these, you're obviously drawing from photographs. Do you try to keep the photographic qualities in the drawings?
Well, the quality of the photographs is pretty poor. The limitations of photography at the time. I mean, there was long exposure times. People moved. Just taking the size of this, which is, I think, maybe 6 inches tall, and I mean, it's going to be, the drawing will be 500 times the size of the source. I mean, it's difficult even to work from life, so to have something so relatively limited, you know, like I said before, it gets me so far, but then at some point, you know, that the resource gets tossed aside and have to really rely on invention and experience, and also just the process of, you know, is this the expression that you know, is really hitting the person that, or revealing the person that I see in there, or the posture. You know, there's a lot of editing that goes on, that push and pull thing talk about in class, but as it relates to who is coming across, it's a challenge, but also a huge opportunity. It's kind of like getting the first page to a novel, and it gets you going, and then, you know, it's your responsibility to fill in quite a bit of the book, and then I believe much of the rest is dependent on the viewer. So kind of like guiding it along. So there is a lot of invention that goes on. It's necessary in order to get the feeling of it. I mean, these photographs are long ago. You know, they had to hold still for a long time. There's often kind of a deadness to it. So the challenge is to bring that life back in. Does that answer your question, David? Kind of. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
The two big ones that I've observed you doing, you sort of started at the left and went to the right.
Mm-hmm.
And so in one like this, that might take you, you know, a year and a half to do or something.
So,
you're going to be a different person at the end than you are at the beginning.
Absolutely.
And then how does that work? I mean, how do you keep it fresh?
It's very difficult. It's like suspending something, suspending a bit of yourself for a long time. In the end, getting back to that, well, you have to resign myself to accept what it is saying it needs. So, for instance, if I get it so far 6 months in, and something pops up that is like, wow, that would be great, but that would mean starting over. I either have to find a compromise or just kind of let that go and maybe work that out with the next one, or start over. I mean, it creates a really difficult choice. But fortunately, with City Band, I was able to compromise quite a bit of that. And having had the experience of Calvary allowed me to do that. So I'm excited to see what comes up in month 8 and 12 and how that might reshape the whole thing, the whole project. Possibly. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
I confess I'm not too familiar with your work. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. Two questions really. Speaking of where you draw your inspiration, no pun intended, have you considered drawing a portrait of yourself from a photograph of yourself, if you haven't already?
I have. Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
and what was that like for you, given the fact that you carefully look at what the person was feeling and thinking and the different facial gestures that they make? Did you manipulate them in any way because you know exactly how that person was feeling because it was you?
Well, actually, it was funny because it was kind of, I mean, you kind of have to remove yourself, get some objectivity from your work no matter what, but I mean, I was using pictures from grade school, and it was also a bit of discovery, like rediscovery, or remember. You know, our memory is kind of funny. We tend to caricature our memory. We tend to think of things as wholly wonderful or wholly awful. When we really think about it, it's a lot more nuanced and much more gray. And that was part of my experience in really any of the work, but especially self-portraits from a me that I'm no longer, or it's just, you know, the beginnings of me. I mean, our physical selves, from what I understand, every cell in our body is different within 7 years. We're a different person. And I don't know, I mean, maybe that's just true. And the you of 7 years ago, which was a different person, is just really more of a precursor for you than not necessarily you. I don't know. It's kind of a tangent, but. And did I answer both questions, or? Oh, okay.
So just out of curiosity, is it easier to, I don't know how Ron mentioned you work from left to right. I guess, why did you make the decision to do left to right versus general to specific?
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, I did general to specific. It was hard to see in a lot of those photos that a lot of the line drawing was done. I mean, the lines were so light. But filling in the value, trying to assign values and suspend it, it doesn't really show in that I go back a lot. I was describing that process to another artist from Art Prize, Haresh, and he said, so if someone were to videotape you, you would look like a photon, you know, dotting all, which is true. You know, I get up and down the ladder, and if I do this over here, that's going to affect what's going on there. And as it keeps on growing, that's that many more pieces to juggle. So it's not just like plowing on through, and each section, as soon as I get through it, then it's done. It's like, okay, now how does that work with all of that? Okay, I gotta go back here and there. Part of working from left to right in that way is that we tend to read from left to right, but also the practical thing is that I'm right-handed. So it leads to a lot less smudging, which I'm trying to avoid so that the lines are visible. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.